Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
I was standing in the kitchen, watching rain drag itself down the window, when the second past due notice hit the floor like a threat. Red line, bold font, the works. It was from the credit union this time. Phoebe's name still on the account, even though she'd been gone 18 months. Before we start, tell us which city or country you're listening from. Let's see which corners of the world we've gathered from today. Thanks. And now the story. My name's Brandon Evans. I was 35 back then, living in Dawson Ridge, Colorado. Widower, single dad, designer artist by trade, which meant I took piecemeal remote gigs, remodel sketches, patio mock-ups, business signage, whatever paid enough to keep the lights on, and Eric's inhaler refills coming. Phoebe died on a rainy stretch of US Highway 285 just outside Fairplay. Head-on collision. That phrase still drops like a dumbbell on my chest. Since then, it had been me and Eric. He was 8, skinny, wheezy, funny in the way kids are when they don't know they're supposed to be sad. He kept getting sick. Flu, RSV, strep, you name it. He brought it home from Dawson Ridge Elementary like a souvenir nobody wanted. Every copay stacked like bricks, and I couldn't bill fast enough to beat the interest. The credit cards? Useless. Maxed out, 24.9 APR, and the late fees multiplied like mold. I'd already sold the second car, cashed out the last of the emergency fund, and returned every gift Phoebe's family ever gave us that could fetch anything at the pawn shop. Only thing left was the cabin. It sat outside town, up near Blue Gulch, tucked where the canyon drops and the road forgets how to be straight. Phoebe's parents had left it to her, never touched it, never let me call it ours. My quiet ridge, she called it. No one argued with her about it, especially not me. I didn't get it, and she never explained. But dead people don't get to make decisions about the living. Not when the bills are close enough to bite. So yeah, I started thinking about selling it. Thought about it for the better part of a week. And then I did it. I posted a listing on Ridge Local, printed out 12 flyers, and stapled them around town. 5 at the grocery, 5 at the post office, 2 at the wind-whipped bus stop that eats Staples for breakfast. By the next afternoon, I got a text from a local number, area code 970. Woman named Hope Thompson. Said she was interested. Wanted to meet on site ASAP before weather made the switchbacks unpassable. Her word, ASAP. I didn't even hesitate. I packed up Eric's inhaler, a granola bar, and his ridiculous capybara plush that mooed like a broken cow when you squeezed it. Don't ask me why it moos. We never figured that out. He thought it was hilarious. Called it his Cappy Moo Rah. As we loaded into the truck, I told myself it was just property. Just square footage and timber. Nothing sacred. But that wasn't true. And I knew it the minute we hit the start of the climb. That road to Blue Gulch curves like it's trying to shake you off. Serpentine. Trees lean too close. Rocks shift in the ditches. It was cold, slick, and mean that day, just like the week that had chewed me up. 6 miles in, I felt it in my ribs like I was opening a door that didn't belong to me. Not really. Not yet. And I kept driving anyway. Hope stepped through the threshold like she'd been here before. She didn't gawk or hesitate, just took it all in with a quick scan and that sharp stillness some people carry like armor. Late 20s, maybe. She had this practical way about her. Jeans tucked into boots, a parka with the sleeves pushed up, hair hooked behind one ear like she didn't want it in her face while she worked. She introduced herself, Hope Thompson, and shook my hand like it was a business deal that mattered. No fake smile, no nervous chatter, just firm grip, steady eyes, and a calm I didn't trust. Inside, the place smelled like lemon oil and dust. You could tell no one had lived here full-time in a while, but nothing was broken. The carved oak table still stood strong under the front window, one leg warped just enough to rock. The couch had the same doily patterns Phoebe's grandma used to crochet, pressed into the cracked leather like fossils. A forgotten mug sat on the mantel, chipped rim, half full of pennies. Hope moved through the cabin like she knew where to step, not like someone who'd studied the listing, like someone who remembered the place. She didn't ask where the kitchen window latch was. She didn't need help finding the back door bolt. I watched her touch it, then check the frame like she'd done it before. She said, "Good bones," and stepped out onto the porch to take a phone call. I didn't catch who it was, just that she kept her voice low and clipped. While she was out there, I opened a side cabinet hoping to find the old well pump instructions. Eric's cough had made me think about water quality and filters, the usual dad anxiety. But instead of papers, I pulled out a black paper envelope. Thick, matte finish. Didn't recognize it. Inside were photos. A stack. The first few were safe. Me and Phoebe at the fairgrounds, our courthouse wedding in Denver with just 2 witnesses, baby Eric in a onesie grinning like the floor told a joke. My throat tightened. I hadn't seen some of these in years, hadn't remembered they even existed. And then the hammer hit. One photo, Phoebe hugging the same woman now standing outside on my porch. The shot was tight but clear. They were standing near a food tent at a county fair, Phoebe in her old denim jacket, Hope in a sun hat. Some guy in a volunteer vest stood next to them, holding a little boy, maybe 3, so they could all fit in the frame. The date stamp was plain, 2 years ago, 6 months before Phoebe's crash. I stared at it so long my vision blurred. My heart didn't race. It dropped, like it gave up. Suddenly every late meeting, every Friday drive she didn't want to explain, every quick shower after a long day, all started forming a picture I didn't want to see. Hope stepped back inside. She saw the envelope in my hands, the photo I was holding. Her eyes locked on mine, and she didn't look away. "You knew my wife," I said. My voice came out ragged, too low. "You knew this place. What exactly is going on?" She didn't blink. "If you let me explain before you decide I'm the villain," she said, "we both might survive this scene." Part of me wanted to shove the envelope into the fireplace and light the match. Part of me wanted to yell, ask her what kind of woman shows up smiling to buy a dead woman's cabin like it's just real estate. But I didn't do any of that. Because my son was sitting in the truck outside, fiddling with a plush animal that mooed like a cow. Because I couldn't lose my grip. Not yet. I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Start talking." She looked past me toward the cottonwoods out near the fence line. "Can we walk?" she asked. "This house deserves better than tension and old dust." I hesitated. "Start where the truth lives." Hope gave a small nod, like she respected the ask. "Then it starts with Phoebe being a better friend than most people deserve." And I let her keep going. We stepped out into the crisp afternoon. The wind bit sharp, but the sun fought to warm the dirt. Hope walked like she remembered the way the rocks jutted near the first tree, how the trail dipped by the wire fence. I stayed a half step behind her, jaw tight, heart confused and tired. "She and I weren't in touch for a long time," Hope began. "We grew up in the same county, lost track of each other after high school, reconnected when my marriage fell apart." I didn't say a word. She offered this place as a favor. Not a romantic getaway, not a secret life, just shelter. "Why not tell me?" I asked. My voice cracked around the edge. "If it wasn't something dirty, why keep it hidden?" Hope didn't flinch. "Because she didn't want you or your son caught in it." "In what?" "Abuse," she said. "A man with power and reach and no soul. You'll get the whole story if you want it." "But this?" She looked around. "This place saved me. Phoebe saved me." We stopped by the first cottonwood. I could see the truck from there, Eric's silhouette bouncing as he played with his toy. That grounded me. "Who's the kid in the photo?" I asked. "My son," she said. "Zach. He was almost 3 then." "And the man?" "Someone Phoebe asked to take the picture. He didn't matter, just a volunteer." I narrowed my eyes. "So why show up now? To buy the place?" "Because I'm afraid of who else might," she said. "Because someone with the wrong intentions might get curious about what this land held." She let that hang in the air for a second. I stared at her, searching for a crack in the story, some tremble in her voice that'd give her away. But all I saw was exhaustion, not fear, not guilt, just the look of someone who'd been holding their breath too long. She added, "If you want me gone, say the word, but don't burn the photos. Not before you know why she kept them." I looked down at the dirt, then back toward the house. I didn't nod. I didn't speak. I just started walking, slow, toward the porch. Hope followed without asking. We sat on the porch steps. Hope rested her arms on her knees like someone used to waiting for the other shoe to drop. The sun was crawling behind the ridge, casting long shadows toward the fence line, and the wind picked up that canyon cold you only get near Blue Gulch. She didn't look at me when she started talking. "Colton Pierce," she said. "Older, moneyed, connected. Always in some investor magazine or local charity gala like he actually cared. Married him when I was 22 and stupid. Thought being chosen meant being special." I didn't interrupt. He dressed clean, talked slow, and had rules. First it was no phones at dinner. Then it was don't wear that shade of lipstick. Then it was how to walk, how to talk, how to breathe right in public. Always dressed me like I was furniture in a showroom. She rubbed her hands together, staring out toward the cottonwoods. When I stepped wrong, the punishment matched the level of shame he felt. One time he accidentally spilled hot tea on my lap because I laughed too loud at a friend's joke. I cried in the guest bathroom while he apologized to the table on my behalf. My chest got tight. Not pity, just a slow, hard ache, like hearing something you can't fix. "He made me delete photos in front of him once," she added. "The ones where Zach was smiling too much. Said we looked like traitors, like we were happier without him." "How long were you with him?" I asked. 6 years. Felt longer. Her voice cracked there, not from crying, just from the weight. I reached my limit when Zach turned almost 3. Colton had this bronze statue in the foyer, some abstract dancer, probably cost more than my college tuition. Zach knocked into it and it wobbled. I caught it, but not fast enough. Colton blamed me, grabbed my arm. I snapped, picked up the thing and smashed it right in front of him. He stared at the shards like I'd murdered his mother. Hope blinked, slow and hard. That night I crawled into the trunk of one of the guards' cars, waited for the shift change. They rotated security every 12 hours, and one of them left his sedan unlocked sometimes. I knew because I used to slip snacks into it for Zach when we went on errands. I curled up under a blanket and didn't breathe for 20 minutes. She turned to me for the first time. I made it out, walked to a train station, caught the first westbound line, and got off 2 stops later in the middle of nowhere. I walked 3 miles under power lines, and that sky smelled like rain and metal. I felt like a ghost. Hope paused. The memory held her still for a second. And then a familiar Subaru pulled over. That hit me sideways. "Phoebe?" I asked. She had the windows down. Her hair was pulled back like always. She looked me up and down and said, "You look like you either need a ride or a coffee." I said I'd take both. She smiled just a little, then shook her head. She didn't ask for details right away. We drove in silence for a while. Then she handed me a bottle of water and said, "When you're ready, I'll listen." That's when I told her everything. No edits, no shame. I just poured it all out, because I had nothing left to lose. We sat quiet for a minute. I heard a woodpecker in the trees. Eric tapped the capybara's sound button, and it mooed faint through the truck window. "She brought you here?" I finally asked. Hope nodded. "This cabin was her idea. She called it the safest place I know that no one cares about. Said nobody from Colton's circle would step foot on a gravel road without cameras or a valet." "And Zach?" I asked. She brought him up the next morning, told me to stay put. Took the Subaru and came back 3 hours later with my boy and 2 bags of groceries. I'll never forget the look on his face. Pure joy and zero confusion. Like he knew he was finally somewhere we could breathe. Hope pulled her parka tighter and looked down at her boots. We stayed hidden. I didn't leave the ridge for 2 months. Phoebe brought supplies, cash envelopes, twice-a-week drops. She used her work trips to cover it. Told her job she was scouting new vendors. I don't know how she juggled it all. She kept it from me, I muttered, jaw tight. All of it. She had to, Hope said, meeting my eyes. She said you'd try to help, and that'd put you and Eric at risk. She called you her heart, Brandon. Said you were the one thing she refused to gamble with. I looked out at the slope behind the cabin. My fists curled into themselves. She ever talk about leaving with you? I asked. Not once. There was never a plan to run. This wasn't a love story. It was a hiding place. Phoebe didn't rescue me for drama or thrill. She did it because she couldn't look away. She never crossed that line, not even close. My throat went dry. And the photo? I asked. Hope nodded. It was a fluke. Things had quieted down. Phoebe said I deserved a normal afternoon. We went to the county fair just once. She asked a random volunteer to take a picture so we'd have proof we'd existed outside of fear. I didn't even know she kept the photo. I stayed silent, knees locked, chest knotted. She did more, Hope added after a beat. Taught me how to manage returns, email vendors, track supply orders. Behind the kitchen pantry there's a bin of tools and leather scraps. She said if I ever wanted to make something again, I should. Make what? Plush animals, she said. She had a whole side thing. Little creatures, stitched with crazy detail. Leather tags, embroidered paws, hand-cut fabric. Called the brand Harbor and Thread. Said it helped her breathe when life got too structured. I stared at the porch post in front of me, the grain of the wood like a map I couldn't read. All that time, and I never knew. There was a man who started walking by the road too often, Hope added. Called himself Harlan. Said he was checking property lines, but he wore city shoes and never waved. Phoebe said if he came any closer, she'd report it. And then, the crash. My stomach turned. I put in the offer fast, she said, because I was afraid someone else would buy it, someone looking for something. I don't know what's left here, but I owe Phoebe more than I can ever repay. I exhaled, slow and sharp. It didn't help. I stood and braced my hands on my knees like a man who just realized the ground under him was solid stone, not sand. My whole sense of who Phoebe was shifted in an instant, like the truth was standing right in front of me the whole time, and I kept walking past it. I need air, I said. Hope stood, brushing her hands off on her jeans. If you want to sell, she said quietly, I'll still buy. No hard feelings. I looked down toward the truck. Eric had his hoodie pulled halfway over his head, capybara in one hand, granola wrapper in the other. I need a day, I told her, and I need to get my kid home before the mountain shade turns this road to ice. She nodded once. No pushback, no pitch, just respect, and that made it easier to walk away. We got back just before the rain hit Dawson Ridge. The sky went slate gray, and the wind sounded like it was looking for something to knock over. I didn't say much to Eric on the drive home, just let him hum to himself in the back seat while he smushed the capybara plush against the window like it was watching the clouds roll in. That night I sat at the kitchen table reworking a rendering for a client who wanted their kitchen island to feel more rustic, but still have built-in charging ports. My laptop fan was wheezing like it needed CPR. Eric sat cross-legged by the baseboard heater in his pajama top, pressing the belly of his toy like he was testing its patience. The thing let out that awful, low-pitched moo, which always sounded like a dying lawnmower. Eric snorted. Dad, is that supposed to be a cow? I kept my eyes on the screen. It's a capybara. He grinned without looking up. Nope, it's a capy-moo-rah. I shook my head, smiled in spite of myself. That joke's aging like milk. Then the plush slipped from his hand, hit the hardwood with a solid thunk, and bounced once. Something inside it shifted, not the usual battery rattle, something off. I walked over, picked it up, and felt along the seams. The sound module sat under a Velcro flap I'd never opened. Behind it was a basic AA battery pack. But wedged under that, tucked into the fabric like a straw hidden behind insulation, was a clear plastic tube no factory had put there. It was sealed with a snug little rubber plug. My gut tensed. Phoebe's fingers, that quiet precision. I recognized her handiwork before I even touched it. I grabbed tweezers from the junk drawer, sat on the floor, and worked the plug out slowly, careful not to stretch the fabric. Out slid a roll of cash, tight and neat, and a small micro SD card in a plastic sleeve the size of a dime. I sat back like someone had just pulled a fire alarm in my chest. The bills were in 20s, 50s, and 2 older 10s, stacked like she'd prepped them in 1-minute windows. I counted out $9,600. My hands weren't shaking yet, but they felt slow. Eric was looking at me now, head tilted. "What's that?" I forced a smile. "Secret treasure. Go brush your teeth. I'll show you a picture later." He rolled his eyes but obeyed, dragging his feet down the hall with the Cappy Moo-Rah still tucked under one arm. I powered up my old backup laptop, the one with the sticky shift key, and slid the micro SD card into the slot. It blinked, loaded, and opened to a folder named Harbor and Thread. Inside were photos, spreadsheets, invoices, and a logo mock-up, stitched wave on a cream fabric tag. The wave had 3 stitch lines through it, and suddenly I remembered the tiny patch I'd seen on the plush Phoebe gave Eric that Christmas before her crash. I thought it was decorative. I was wrong. There were 52 orders logged across a year and a half. Average price per item, $210. Shipping labels to Eugene, Oregon, Cary, North Carolina, Bozeman, Montana, all neatly sorted, marked by status, delivered, repeat buyer, wait list. Her notes were soft but clear, like her voice. A second sheet tracked 2 bulk orders through a craft co-op I'd never heard of, plus 6 handwritten entries for local cash pickups. No names, just initials and amounts. That part wasn't on the main spreadsheet. It was on a second tab labeled Quiet Sales. Total income from the entire project? $21,400. Lined up to the cent with a separate bank ledger PDF I found in a different folder, showing deposits into a savings account I'd never seen. There were PDFs of supply orders from a fabric shop in Golden, invoices for leather tags, thread, batting, stuffing, and dye. It was all real, all legit, and completely off my radar. Tucked with the cash roll was a folded page. On one side, a printed list of small-scale plush distributors, wholesale leads with highlighted names and margin estimates. On the back, a sticky note in Phoebe's slanted handwriting. "If I can't say it, this should say it. For you and Eric, just in case." That cracked me. I sat on the floor with a plush mammal, a straw tube, and more love than I knew what to do with. And I cried. Not the kind of cry you warn people about. The kind that hits out of nowhere and drops you where you sit. The kind that makes you grip the floor just to remind yourself it's still under you. Because she hadn't left me with nothing. She'd left me with a map. She didn't trust the world enough to speak it, but she'd trusted me enough to hide it where only someone who knew her hands would notice the seam. I didn't touch the money that night. Instead, I made 3 copies of the card files. One to my backup drive. One onto a USB stick I taped to the bottom of the desk drawer. One to the cloud. Then I put the micro SD back in the sleeve and sealed it in a sandwich bag with the cash. I stashed it all in a coffee can behind the water heater, inside a zip bag with silica packets. You learn things living in Colorado. One of them is moisture always wins if you don't respect it. By the time the clock hit 2 in the morning, I wasn't tired. I was wired. I pulled out a notepad and started scribbling. Business structure, logo ideas, what I knew how to do, what I actually liked doing. Phoebe's plan wasn't loud or flashy, but it was real, and it had roots. By sunrise, I had one too. I decided I'd pay minimums on the cards for 2 months to buy time. I'd take whatever design jobs I could get, and in the cracks between, I'd build something that wasn't just survival. I wasn't chasing legacy. I was chasing air, room to breathe. A name that meant something. A business I could hand to my son someday and say, "Your mom planted this." And that capybara? I sewed the Velcro shut again, repacked the battery and module, let it moo. Because that ridiculous thing just saved our future. I filed the LLC paperwork 2 days later, Cappy Fibs design. Eric read it over my shoulder, then laughed so hard he nearly dropped his cereal spoon. "You're naming your company after a mooing potato?" he asked, and I told him no. It was after the smartest plush animal in the house. Truth was, I needed her in it. Not as a ghost, not as a shrine, just something that felt like a thread running forward instead of back. Fibs was the old maker name Phoebe stitched into her plush tags. Simple block lettering, no frills. It made me feel like I was including her without pretending she was still here. I rented a studio above a bike shop on Oak Street. $540 a month, no central air, single-pane windows, and a floor that creaked like it didn't trust me. Still, it was mine. I moved in with my laptop, my drafting boards, and an old stool from the garage that still had sawdust in the joints. The first jobs were what I could get. Permit drawings for a porch rebuild, storefront signage for a guy opening a secondhand book cafe. I did a full redesign on a Greasy Spoons menu layout for $1,800 and finished it in 4 nights flat, powered by gas station coffee and leftover Halloween candy. Every invoice sent was one less call from the credit card company. But late at night, when the work orders paused and the studio got quiet, I turned back to Harbor and Thread. Phoebe's micro SD card gave me everything I needed: supplier contacts, tag templates, fabric vendors, even her unit pricing breakdowns. I didn't touch the brand publicly, not yet. Just kept it running on a whisper. 5 plushes a month, tops. Each one hand-stitched, each one waitlisted. No ads, just word of mouth. That's all it needed. Hope came by the studio one afternoon while Zach was at preschool. She brought muffins and a utility bill. I told her I wasn't selling the cabin. Not yet. She could stay until spring. No strings. We drew up a month-to-month lease with rent at $200 flat. She pushed back at first, said it was too generous. I told her I needed to sleep at night, and that made her finally nod. We added a caretaker clause, yard maintenance, snow clearing, and an extra line that said, "Eyes on the property." Hope insisted on signing a receipt each month. "Keeps me proud," she said. I understood. Eric and Zach clicked faster than I expected. Zach followed Eric like a satellite, dragging his blue toy train everywhere, even the bathtub. The house sounded like life again. Toy wheels on tile, crayon fights, and mismatched giggles in the hallway. I didn't realize how quiet it had been until it wasn't anymore. 2 weeks in, the real noise started. Marla, my mother-in-law, called 17 times in a single day. Voicemails stacked up, softly manipulative at first, then cold. She wanted me to sign something called a family trust. Said it would safeguard Eric's future, but it smelled like control. I didn't call back. Her sister Denise fired off a text that said I was disrespecting Phoebe's legacy by keeping the cabin. I stared at it for a full minute, then slid my phone into a drawer and went back to packing a plush capybara bound for Boise. They didn't want clarity. They wanted ownership, and they weren't getting it. 3 days later, Harlan reappeared. Hope called me from the porch, voice calm but clipped. He was standing by the fence again, pointing at the ground, talking about survey boundaries like he owned the dirt. I dropped everything and drove straight up the ridge. He was still there when I pulled in. Button-down shirt too crisp for gravel, eyes too polite to trust. I stood beside Hope, arms crossed, not smiling. He turned to me. "Just checking some old property markers. You folks seen any metal stakes pop up near the easement line? If you're looking for exact lines, bring a licensed surveyor and a clipboard," I said. "Otherwise this is trespassing." He held my stare a second too long, then gave that fake laugh chuckle people use before walking away. I took down his plate number as he drove off, slow like he wanted to be remembered. The next morning, I filed a no trespass notice with the county sheriff. Then I drove to Dawson Hardware, bought a $99 motion sensor camera, and screwed it into the porch frame aimed right at the lane. It sent clips straight to my phone, just in case. Back at the studio, things picked up. I finished a mural for a coffee shop in downtown Ridge, a mountain sunrise with abstract capybaras tucked into the trees. Nobody noticed but Eric, who declared I was secretly a plush ninja. I added 5 small remodel permit sets to the stack, then took on a branding kit for a landscaping company that paid $3,600 split across 3 invoices. That one helped me breathe. At night, I stitched ears, sewed eyes, cut tags out of soft leather stamped with the stitched wave. My machine was cheap and loud and needed constant coaxing, but it worked. In those quiet hours, I found myself talking to Phoebe under my breath, not in grief, not in ghost summoning, just as if she were still working across the table from me. I told her when a plush came out crooked. I told her when the thread knotted. I told her when Zach said moo at a train and Eric laughed so hard he spilled juice on the rug. Somewhere in all of it, I realized I wasn't drowning anymore. Not exactly. I was swimming. Still ugly, still slow, but towards something solid. Hope kept her end of the lease like clockwork. Shoveled the porch, swept the gutters, even fixed a broken cabinet hinge in the pantry I hadn't touched since Phoebe passed. She didn't intrude. She just kept the place breathing. Eric asked one night if Zach could sleep over. I said yes before thinking twice. They piled blankets in the living room and made the capybara moo until I threatened to unplug it. The sound made the house feel whole again. I still got texts from Denise every few days. Screenshots of lawyer blogs, inheritance threads, friendly reminders that family is sacred. I deleted them all without responding. That studio above the bike shop? It smelled like chain grease and rubber and whatever candle the yoga place down the street always burned. But it was mine. It had my sweat in the grout lines and my drafts pinned crooked on the walls. Cappy Fib's design wasn't fancy. It wasn't loud, but it was real. And I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something that might outlast me. The call came on a Tuesday morning, early March. I was balancing a takeout cup on a stack of spec drawings when my cell buzzed with an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut said, pick up. Mr. Evans, this is Nora Abbott. I'm with the Colorado Attorney General's Office, Financial Crimes Division. I need to ask about your wife's accident. The voice was clipped even. Not cold, just sharp, like a file that doesn't care how rusted the bolt is. My palm went clammy against the phone. I didn't ask why now. I just said yes. She asked to meet at the studio, not the house. That told me a lot. It meant she'd done her homework. She wasn't going to walk into a kitchen where a kid might be eating Cheerios in his pajamas and blow it all up. I respected that before I even saw her face. She showed up on time, no hesitation, navy field jacket and flat boots that had seen some mileage. She was maybe 38, tall enough to stand straight without looking like she had something to prove. Binder in one hand, pen already uncapped in the other. Not a tablet, not a laptop. She used a pen. Real paper. I opened the door and she nodded once. Not a handshake kind of meeting. Inside, she glanced around the studio. Drafting boards on one side, sewing machine on the other, plush prototypes in a bin by the door, capybaras in various stages of ear attachment lined up like a workshop for misfit rodents. You got kids? I asked, mostly to cut the tension. Twins, she said, flipping open the binder. 9 years old, terrible at taking turns, excellent at stealing cookies. That made me smile for the first time in a while. She didn't. Then she got to it. I'm reopening an inquiry into your wife's crash on U.S. Highway 285. It was classified as accidental loss of control, but we've received new internal documentation from her employer, specifically around audits, expense variances, and flagged irregularities in regional ledgers. Your wife's name appears on multiple threads. That word, threads, cut straight through me. I sat down. She continued, There's reason to believe your wife uncovered substantial financial mismanagement. possibly tied to shell vendors and manipulated contractor reports. The timeline matches up with the week before the crash. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I didn't know what to say yet. She didn't push. I stood up, walked over to the closet, and dug out an old zip pouch. It was buried under a roll of trimmed tape and a broken staple gun. Inside were 3 of Phoebe's old sketchbooks. I didn't know what I was looking for, just something. Anything. The second one had it. Back cover, taped under a sticky note labeled board stuff, in Phoebe's blocky handwriting. A thumb drive. I handed it over. Nora didn't take it right away. She pulled a paper log sheet from her binder, filled it out by hand, labeled the drive, dated it, and only then slid it into an evidence pouch. Evidentiary caution keeps cases alive, she said, like it was something she'd repeated more than once. We plugged it into my laptop together. It loaded fast. Phoebe always had clean folder trees, spreadsheets, PDFs, internal memos, screenshots of flagged invoice chains. A folder labeled Voss West, with nested subfolders for budget reports, contractor lists, and what looked like exported voicemails from a work number. Nora leaned in, reading quick. She didn't react to any one thing, but her pen scratched steadily across her notepad. I couldn't follow it all, but the names and dates lined up. I saw a variance correction enough times to know Phoebe had walked into something deep. I sat back. She put cash in a plush toy, data on a hidden drive, files in a sketchbook. She didn't trust one basket for anything. Nora gave a slow nod. Your wife was smart, cautious. Too cautious for a standard fender slip on a dry day with low traffic. I looked at my hands. They didn't feel like mine. You think someone staged it? I think she had leverage, Nora said, and leverage makes certain people nervous. She didn't press past that, just cataloged what she needed, zipped up her pouch, and stood. I offered her coffee out of habit. She accepted, and I realized my hands were shaking too hard for mugs. I poured it into paper cups. She took hers black. I'm not at liberty to share details yet, she said, but I'll be in touch as the case moves. She turned to leave, then paused by the work table. You make those? She asked, nodding at the half-stitched capybara slouched against a pincushion. Yeah, I said. My kid named them Cappy Moo-Rahs. They moo when you press their belly. Don't ask why. She studied it a second longer. My twins would call that a potato hippo. I snorted. Accurate. She didn't blink. Of course it moos. She left with the same clean movement she came in with. No wasted steps, no drawn-out goodbye. That night I was brushing Eric's teeth when my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. This is Nora. Any suspicious activity around the cabin in the last 72 hours? Surveillance clips? Car sightings? No emojis, no fluff. Just straight to the point. I forwarded 2 clips from the motion cam, both showing Harlan pacing the ditch like he'd lost something. One clear plate capture. I labeled the files, added a timestamp, and typed, "Here's what I've got. He's not just wandering." She replied, "Noted. We'll cross-reference with vehicle registry." I stared at that message a second longer than I meant to. It wasn't the content. It was the feel of it. Like someone else had finally stepped into the fire with me. That night I slept harder than I had in months. It wasn't that the nightmare was over. It was just that I wasn't holding it all by myself anymore. The envelope came by courier. No signature, just a plain folder dropped at the front desk of the bike shop. My name was typed clean across the front. No return address. I opened it sitting at my drafting table, still holding a Sharpie from the layout I'd been sketching. First page, bold header. Unauthorized harboring of minor. Zachary Pierce. Underneath, some $10 legal language accusing me of facilitating interstate concealment and hope of unlawful detainment of the minor child. I snorted once and tossed it onto the table like it was junk mail. Then I picked up my phone and called Nora. She answered like she always did. On the 3rd ring, no greeting fluff. I told her what I had in front of me. Forward everything, she said. Give me 30 minutes. I'll loop in a victim advocate I trust. I scanned the docs, sent them through, and didn't ask what came next. I didn't have to. By that afternoon, Nora had connected with someone in the El Paso County courts. They prepped a motion for an emergency protection order under domestic violence statute with attached risk history. Apparently, when your paperwork is clean and the other party's track record looks like spilled oil on a driveway, things move fast. That night I didn't tell Hope. Not yet. She'd been bracing every time her phone lit up. I wanted the papers signed and stamped before she had to read another threat. Next morning, a different storm hit. Marla. She showed up at my house with Denise beside her like backup, both in long coats like they were attending a funeral I hadn't invited them to. I opened the door because Eric had just come back from school and was upstairs changing, and I didn't want a scene on the front lawn. Marla didn't wait for an opening. We need to talk about Eric's future. I spoke to a family lawyer who specializes in legacy trusts. Phoebe would have. Not happening, I said. I'm his father. You're not putting him in some paper cage. Denise stepped forward. It's not about control, Brandon. It's about preserving what Phoebe left behind. I looked between them, tight-lipped. She left me behind too, but nobody's preserving that. Then I shut the door without another word. They stood there for a second. I watched through the peephole. Then they turned and left. Later that night, Eric had a panic flare-up. Gym day at school. Too much running, too much chalk dust in the locker room. I heard him coughing down the hall and found him hunched over by the bed, face pale, wheezing sharp. I grabbed the nebulizer, plugged it in, and sat beside him on the rug while the machine hissed to life. He clutched the mask and tried to breathe slow. I rubbed circles on his back and hummed the same quiet pattern Phoebe used to hum. It wasn't a song, just low, even notes to remind the body not to panic. It worked. Eventually. Before sunrise, my phone buzzed with a cabin cam alert. 6:17 in the morning. 2 men at the fence line. One was lifting the latch. I threw on boots over pajama pants and was in the truck within 3 minutes. That switchback drive to Blue Gulch had never felt so short. I took it like every curve owed me rent. By the time I got there, they were gone. Tire tracks told the story. Parked at the upper turnout, walked the short path through the trees. Latch tampered, not broken. Boot prints in the snowmelt. One set matched the kind of tread Harlan wore. Back in town, I checked my motion feed. The license plate came through. Same one Nora had flagged near mile marker 62 a few weeks ago. I called her from the trailhead. She picked up quick. I told her what I saw. 2 men, pre-dawn, trying the fence. Her tone sharpened. Westgate Risk shows up in Graham Voss's contracting pool. Same outfit did some private work for Colton Pierce 3 years back. That overlap isn't proof of coordination, but it's a bad look. I ran my hand through my hair. So we've got Voss, Colton, and maybe Harlan, all within 3 degrees of each other. We don't chase ghosts, she said. We hammer nails. I exhaled. Let me know what kind of hammer you need. That night, Eric sat at the kitchen table with a blue marker and drew a capybara wearing a police badge. He named it Officer Moo. Zach helped by sticking train stickers around it, like a perimeter. When they finished, Eric taped it to the fridge with 2 pieces of painter's tape. I think he protects the house now, Eric said. He does, I told him. You made him that way. 2 days later, Hope came into the studio holding an envelope from the sheriff's department, hands trembling. She didn't speak at first. I opened it, skimmed the top. Protective order approved. Temporary no contact in place. Hearing set. I looked up. You're covered now. She blinked a few times, then set the envelope down like it might bite her and said, I didn't think it would feel like this. Like what? Like I'm allowed to breathe. Later that week, I had to run into Dawson Ridge to grab a part for a printer roller. On my way out of the hardware store, I spotted Harlan. He was in the coffee shop, pretending to read the classifieds. No coffee in front of him, no creamer packets, no half-stirred mug, just sitting there with a newspaper he wasn't actually flipping. I walked in, sat down across from him without asking. "If you want to talk about fences," I said, "bring a surveyor. If not, stay off my land." He folded the paper with fake patience. "Just making use of public space." "Good. Then you'll understand when I forward this visit to the sheriff's office." He stood, adjusted his coat like I'd wrinkled it with my words, and left. I stayed in that seat for 5 more minutes just to make the point. Driving back up the canyon, the sleet came in sideways, thin blades cutting through the dim. I gripped the wheel hard, tires humming, hands tight. The sky looked like lead, and the road curved in that way it does where you can't see past the next bend, but you go anyway. I didn't talk to myself much these days, but that night, I said it out loud. "Phoebe, I'm done being the quiet one." It felt heavier than a vow. It felt like I'd finally stepped into the part of this I should have stepped into months ago. The fight wasn't coming. It was already here. By the time late summer rolled around, about 6 months after Nora first called, the case had a spine. Emails, phone logs, meeting records, audit trails. The thumb drive from Phoebe's sketchbook became the keystone, but what locked everything in place was the traffic reconstruction report. Nora handed me a printed copy at the studio. I read the top line twice before I could make myself move through the rest. The SUV that cut Phoebe off near the Blue Gulch switchback? Registered to a fleet under Westgate Risk Management. Pool car. No name listed, but the plate matched down to the last digit. It had been checked out and never returned on time. The pieces clicked together like wet puzzle board. In early fall, the embezzlement charges landed first. Variance fraud, shell contractors, funneled transfers totaling $2.1 million over 3 quarters. Voss looked stunned in the courthouse photos, like the floor had dropped a step without warning. His lawyer claimed he'd never seen the accounts, claimed it was unauthorized back-end activity. Sure. By early winter, the grand jury came back. Vehicular homicide charges, 2 counts, 1 for reckless endangerment, 1 for deliberate obstruction of safety. They didn't use the word murder, but the way Nora said staged accident, you didn't have to. I read the indictment in the kitchen with Eric asleep down the hall. I couldn't breathe for a second. I stepped outside, stood by the cottonwood in the backyard, and waited until I could feel my own legs again. The air was sharp, cold, honest. That same week, Hope's court date came up. Her hands were still when we sat down. That's how I knew she believed it would hold this time. The judge read through the protection order like he wasn't expecting to be surprised. Then Nora's packet came through the clerk's hands. Timeline, financial abuse indicators, therapist's letter, Zach's pediatric reports from the time Colton took him to corrective training at some private camp in Utah. The judge read for 5 minutes straight, didn't ask a single follow-up question, signed the order for 3 years, full restrictions, and added a clause barring Colton from initiating unsupervised contact, pending further review. Colton's attorney blinked like he'd just swallowed a fly. Of course, Colton still tried to file a custody motion. Probably thought money would make time forget. Nora sat down with us, packaged everything into a timeline with the risk points bolded. The therapist's affidavit alone could have buried him. His motion didn't even make it to full hearing. Dead on arrival. By late February, the trial began. Phoebe never got to tell her side, but the paperwork did. The state's traffic reconstruction expert testified first. Blueprints of the Blue Gulch curve, weather records from that night, braking tests, tire mark overlays. He laid it out plain. Phoebe's path didn't veer by accident. The SUV moved into her lane with intent. She swerved. No shoulder, no time. From the back row of the courtroom, it looked almost clean, so factual, so removed. But I felt every syllable like sandpaper against a bruise. Voss folded during week 2, took a plea deal. 9 years, state time, restitution terms, barred from any fiduciary roles for life. 2 Westgate contractors cut deals for reduced sentencing in exchange for testimony. They confessed to pressure from upper management to keep things quiet. One admitted he signed off on the fake vendor forms. The other confirmed Voss was present at a cleanup meeting the day after the crash. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. I felt relief, anger, emptiness, all at once. Grief doesn't care about verdicts. It doesn't end with a signature. But justice? Justice closes doors that should have never been opened. Back at the studio, life kept moving. Cappy Cappy Fibs Design landed a city contract, wayfinding signs for the downtown revitalization project. $62,000 spread over 3 phases. I hired a part-time drafter who knew how to use Revit better than I did and didn't ask questions when I needed quiet. I finally bought a printer that didn't jam every 3rd sheet. That felt like progress. Marla stopped calling. No voicemails, no pop-ins, no surprise concerns about Eric's routine. Denise mailed one brittle card, white with silver script. "For Eric's sake, we hope you're happy." I slid it into the drawer with takeout menus and forgotten charger cables. Never opened it again. Hope started applying for admin jobs. She didn't want a handout, didn't want to live in anyone's spare room. She told me over coffee, "I just want Tuesday morning problems. Printer jams, HR memos, what to pack Zach for lunch. I want to worry like normal people." I told her she deserved that. One afternoon, after the verdict was read and the courtroom buzz had died down, I stood in the hallway near the exit doors, hands in my pockets, watching the wind push against the glass like it wanted in. Nora walked up beside me. No fanfare, no clipboard. She didn't hug me, didn't offer some neat line about closure. She just said, "She did good work. You are too." That landed harder than anything else that week, because it felt real. Not a pat on the back, not a scripted ending. Just one person telling another, "Keep going. You're finally on the right road." Spring came in fast and messy, like it always does around Dawson Ridge. Mud on tires, soccer cleats on the porch, windshield wipers that never keep up. Eric joined a local rec league team. Didn't care about winning. He ran after the ball like it owed him lunch, and when he missed, he'd explain to the coach that capybaras don't play offense. He brought that plush to every game, sat it on the bench next to his water bottle like it was part of the lineup. Kids would ask, "Why does it moo?" And Eric would grin like he'd been waiting all day. It's not a cow, it's a Cappy Moo Rah, obviously. Zach followed him around like a loyal sidekick, blue toy train gripped in one fist, yelling "Go, go!" at whichever direction the ball happened to be moving. It felt like a family photo, unfinished, a little crooked, but warm and real in a way I hadn't felt in years. Hope found a rental closer to town. 2 bedrooms, yard just big enough for Zach to roll his train through the mud, and a front door that locked right on the first try. Landlord answered texts. That alone made it a miracle. The cabin became our weekend spot. Summer plans. No secrets. We redrafted the papers, put everything above board. Title, taxes, maintenance schedule. We built it clean. Cappy Cappy Fibs kept me busy but not buried. I did a logo for a roofing company run by 3 brothers who never answered emails but always showed up on time. Drew permit sets for 2 porches, one with a sunshade that needed extra clearance for HOA approval. The dentist mural was my favorite. Bright colors, silly shapes, and I hid 3 capybaras in the design. Only Eric could find them without help. Nora waited. She said she would. After the DA officially closed her part and cleared the record, after we knew nothing else would fall out of the woodwork, we started doing evening walks. No texts past work hours, no official dates, just slow steps and shared air. One night we sat on the stoop outside the studio. Sun was down, streets quiet, wind brushing past like it didn't want to interrupt. I stared out over the parking lot and said, "I still talk to Phoebe sometimes." Nora didn't flinch, just nodded like she already knew. "I talk to my husband in the laundry aisle," she said. "Usually when I forget what brand of dryer sheets he liked." We laughed. The kind of laugh that hurts first, then feels good. Her boys, Benny and Tom, were loud, curious, and full of sideways logic. They called me Mr. B and tried to feed the capybara plush a Cheerio during dinner. Eric watched them with a proud look and told them, "He only eats thunder and batteries, Keep up. I didn't plan the proposal like some grand gesture. I just waited for a day that felt clean enough to carry it. It came on a Sunday. Blue Gulch sky stretched wide and clear. We grilled hot dogs while the boys used sticks to race trains over a half-rotted stump. Nora had her hair tied up, sunglasses pushed on top of her head, and one shoe off because Zach had stolen it for a game I didn't understand. I pulled the silver band from my coat pocket. No box, no speech, just a ring and the weight behind it. She was stacking plates when I said, "Hey." She looked over. "Yeah?" I held it out. "You want to keep doing this for the long haul?" Her face froze, just for a breath. Then her mouth curved, tight and soft. "That a yes or a no?" I asked. "It's a yes," she said, voice shaking just a little. "Scares me to my core, but yeah." We told the kids with ice cream. 3 scoops each, no guilt. Eric blinked twice, then asked, "Can the capybara be the ring bearer?" "Only if it moose," I said. Hope hugged us both when she found out, held on a second longer than usual. "Phoebe would have rolled her eyes," she said, then cried, then cooked too much food and forced everyone to eat seconds. I nodded. That sounds exactly right. Later that night, when the house was quiet and the ring sat on the nightstand next to my keys, I stood in the kitchen and stared at the calendar. There was one more thing I had to do before we set a date. I had to go to Phoebe's grave and say it out loud. Not for closure, not for permission, but because it was the one hard thing I still owed her. I went alone on a Tuesday, the kind of day where the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or shine. Sunlight cut through cloud breaks 1 minute, then disappeared like it was ashamed of showing up too early. The cemetery at Dawson Ridge was still the same, old maples leaning toward the gravel path, the wind carrying that quiet hush you only get in places where people speak in past tense. I parked near the back row and walked slow, boots pressing into soft ground still damp from yesterday's rain. Phoebe's stone was there, tucked between 2 low shrubs, same as always. A flat marble chip marker with her name etched clean and a photo set into the corner. She was smiling in it, head tilted, eyes squinted, like someone had just made a dumb joke she was trying not to laugh at. I knelt first, brushed away needles and blown leaves with my palm, then stood and slid my hands into my jacket like I was waiting to be called up in class. "I should have trusted you," I said. "You always had a plan, and I was the one checking boxes and double confirming calendars. I was the careful one, and I still missed everything that mattered." The wind picked up just a little. Not enough to call it a gust, just enough to let me know it heard. I told her about Hope, about the day she showed up at the gate with those careful eyes, and how Blue Gulch wasn't a secret love nest like I'd feared, but a safe harbor, same as Phoebe had named it in her spreadsheets. The way she'd protected that cabin, not for herself, but for someone else, made me feel small and proud at the same time. "I found it," I said. "The micro SD. You hid it in the Capi Mura. Of course you did." I paused, then let out a breath. Only you would think to put a road map inside a mooing rodent. I told her about the spreadsheets, how neat they were, how they made sense of things I never would have seen. Her order lists, her notes, the logo mock-up with that stitched wave. She'd been building something while I was busy thinking she was just gone all the time. I told her it wasn't stupid. It was smart, careful, brave. Then I told her about Nora. I told her how Nora doesn't sugar anything, doesn't play big emotions like they're some kind of spotlight performance, how she's a mother who gets up early, packs lunches, and doesn't complain when everything's on fire, how she walks into courtrooms like she already knows how it ends, but still asks the hard questions anyway. "She's solid," I said. "She doesn't try to fix grief. She just stands next to it without flinching." I told her about the case, how it ended with sentences, not just sympathy, how the courtroom was too cold, how the air stung, how I stood outside after the verdict until I could feel my feet again. I told her some nights I sleep now. Not all, but some, and how the headlights in the rear view don't make my stomach turn anymore. I looked down at the capybara keychain in my hand. It was soft, stitched by me, but made from one of Phoebe's old patterns. Little leather tag with the stitched wave, Harbor and Threads mark, looped through a brass ring. "I'm gonna marry Nora," I said. "It's not a replacement. It's not forgetting you. It's just me doing what you always did." Continuing. I crouched and placed the keychain at the base of the stone, nestled it just under the photo like a nod. No fanfare. "I'm sorry," I said, "for the arguments, for the times I made your stubbornness into something I tried to fix instead of something I should have honored." I stayed until my knees started to ache and the wind picked up again, this time with enough bite to remind me I'd been there longer than I realized. Then I stood, dusted off my hands, and walked back toward the truck with my head a little lighter. When I got home, Eric was on the couch, feet under a blanket, Cappy Moo-Rah in his lap. He looked up and asked, "Do you think Mom can hear us from there?" I sat down beside him, pulled him close. "I think so," I said, "and I think she laughed at your cow joke." He grinned and pressed the plush. It mooed loud and low. "Dad, you still call it a cow?" he said. "It's the Cappy Moo-Rah." "Right," I said, and this time the word didn't feel like settling. It felt like starting again, without losing anything worth keeping. "Before you head out, let me put something on your mind. If you were in Brandon's shoes, would you have found the strength to move forward the way he did? If you've got the hype feature, tap it now to help this story reach more people. And don't forget to subscribe and hit like. It's a small click that means a lot. Drop a comment too, even a simple good story or your own take on it. Love you guys.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.